Welcome to Capitol Catch-Up, the podcast that brings you a clear look at what's happening on Capitol Hill. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lainey. Today we're diving deep into a slate of bills and resolutions that have moved through Congress this session, from big-ticket infrastructure spending to a series of measures aimed at improving outcomes for foster youth, plus some national security and technology legislation. Let's start with the appropriations landscape.
The first item on the docket is House Bill 9022, the Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2027. This bill earmarks $2.382 billion for construction projects, $6.255 billion for operation and maintenance, and $223 million for regulatory programs across agencies like the Corps of Engineers, the Department of the Interior, and the Bureau of Reclamation.
Those numbers translate into funding for flood control projects, coastal emergency response, and water infrastructure finance and innovation programs. The bill also places a few notable restrictions. It bars reprogramming of funds without congressional approval, prohibits money for water supply reallocation studies, and bans the use of funds for open lake placement alternatives for dredged material. The Secretary of the Interior will have to report back to Congress on how the money is allocated, adding a layer of oversight.
In practical terms, that oversight could help ensure that the billions go to projects that directly benefit communities vulnerable to flooding or water scarcity, rather than being diverted to less urgent initiatives. It's a classic example of how appropriations bills not only fund programs, but also shape policy priorities.
Moving on, House Bill 9010 provides the budget for the legislative branch itself for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2027. The total allocation is $2.1 billion, with $900 million for members, representational allowances, which cover district office expenses, and $453 million for compensation and expenses of officers and employees. It also earmarks $708 million for Capitol Police salaries and $199 million for general expenses.
A key provision here is the prohibition on purchasing information technology equipment from certain Chinese companies. That reflects ongoing concerns about supply chain security and potential espionage. The bill also mandates in-person workplace misconduct training for members, a step aimed at addressing harassment and fostering a safer work environment on the Hill.
The bill also funds joint committees like the Joint Economic Committee and the Joint Committee on Taxation, which play a crucial role in shaping fiscal policy. By allocating resources to these bodies, Congress ensures they can continue their analytical work that informs budget decisions.
Next up is House Resolution 5, which adopts the rules of the House for the 119th Congress. This isn't a funding bill, but it sets the procedural framework for how the House will operate. Notable changes include allowing electronic voting in committees, clarifying the Chief Administrative Officer's responsibilities for vacant offices, and designating the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform.
The resolution also adopts the Holman Rule, a procedural tool that lets members propose amendments to cut specific expenditures, even down to individual line items. That can be a powerful lever for fiscal restraint, though it's often controversial because it can target specific programs or even individual employees.
Another procedural tweak is the creation of a spending reduction account within general appropriation bills, which essentially creates a budget balancing bucket that can be used to offset new spending. The Congressional Budget Office will now be required to estimate inflationary impacts and the effects on the Federal Hospital Insurance Trust Fund and the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Trust Fund when analyzing legislation. That adds a layer of fiscal foresight that was missing before.
While we're on House business, let's talk about House Resolution 1096, which expedited consideration of the Department of Homeland Security appropriations for fiscal year 2026, originally House Bill 4213. The resolution waived certain points of order and allowed an amendment in the nature of a substitute, essentially fast-tracking the funding to ensure DHS could continue its critical missions without interruption.
That kind of procedural shortcut is used when there's an urgent need, think border security, disaster response, or cyber defense, so that the department isn't left waiting for a drawn-out debate. It underscores how Congress can balance thoroughness with speed when national security is at stake.
Shifting gears, a substantial portion of today's discussion centers on legislation aimed at foster youth. The first is House Bill 7529, the Fresh Starts for Foster Youth Act. It requires states to consider legal issues, housing, education, employment, family connections, when planning case transitions, and it gives states the option to tap funds from the John H. Chafee Foster Care Program for successful transition to adulthood to provide legal counseling.
That's a big step, because legal barriers often derail a young person's path to independence. By mandating that case plans address those issues, the bill aims to reduce the risk of homelessness or school dropout among former foster youth.
Building on that, House Bill 7995, known as the Connect Act, updates the purposes of the same Chafee program to reflect research and the lived experiences of youth. It emphasizes the importance of long-term relationships with mentors, adults, and peers. The bill provides guidance to states on how to implement these relationship-focused goals.
Then we have House Bill 7432, the Fostering the Future Act. It expands education and workforce training opportunities, raises the maximum education and training voucher amount, and allows states to use program funds for supportive housing services. It also extends services to expectant and parenting youth through the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting Program.
The Foster Youth Workforce Opportunity Act, House Bill 7343, further broadens eligibility for education and training programs to youth as young as 14, not just those who have aged out. It adds apprenticeships and defines remedial education to include pathways to a high school diploma or post-secondary readiness.
Complementing that, House Bill 7463, the Foster Youth Post-Secondary Education Access and Success Act, raises the maximum voucher from $5,000 to $12,000 and requires states to actively inform eligible youth about the benefits and simplify the application process. That could dramatically increase college enrollment among former foster youth.
Finally, House Bill 7655, the Support for Expectant and Parenting Foster Youth Act, strengthens coordination with the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting Program, ensuring that expectant and parenting youth receive evidence-based home visiting and case management services.
Taken together, these bills represent a coordinated effort to modernize the Chafee program, address legal and educational gaps, and provide a safety net that extends beyond the age of emancipation. If enacted, they could improve outcomes for thousands of young people each year.
Moving to broader infrastructure, House Bill 8870, the Build America 250 Act, is a comprehensive transportation bill. It authorizes billions for federal aid highways, bridge construction and rehabilitation, highway safety programs, transit, and rail. It also streamlines project delivery, improves environmental review processes, and pushes for advanced safety technologies like image recording devices on trains and autonomous commercial vehicle integration.
The Act's emphasis on safety and innovation reflects lessons learned from past infrastructure failures and the growing need to accommodate new transportation modes. By investing in both traditional roads and emerging technologies, the bill aims to boost economic growth while enhancing public safety.
On the international front, House Bill 2913, the Ukraine Support Act, reaffirms U.S. commitment to NATO, condemns Russia's aggression, including the kidnapping of Ukrainian children, as acts of genocide, and authorizes diplomatic, economic, and military assistance to Ukraine. It also creates a special coordinator for Ukrainian reconstruction and supports Radio Free Europe to counter Russian disinformation.
That legislation underscores the strategic importance the U.S. places on European security and the broader goal of supporting democratic institutions in the face of authoritarian aggression.
Turning to technology and national security, Senate Bill 3023, the Safe Cloud Storage Act, limits liability for cloud service providers that store child sexual abuse material on behalf of law enforcement agencies. It sets strict cybersecurity and access controls, requires notification to the Department of Justice if a breach occurs, and offers limited liability protection except in cases of intentional misconduct.
The intent is to enable law enforcement to access critical evidence while protecting vendors from undue legal exposure, provided they follow rigorous security protocols.
In the same vein, Senate Bill 1473, the Stop Stealing Our Chips Act, strengthens export controls on advanced artificial intelligence chips. It creates a whistleblower incentive program that rewards individuals with a share of fines levied against companies that violate export rules. And it establishes an export compliance accountability fund to finance those awards and protect whistleblowers from retaliation.
This response comes after reports that cutting-edge chips were diverted to adversarial nations, posing a direct threat to U.S. national security. By encouraging insiders to report violations, the bill aims to close gaps in the export control regime.
Finally, Senate Resolution 747 designates May 2026 as Renewable Fuels Month. The resolution highlights how renewable fuels, ethanol, biodiesel, lower fuel prices, reduce reliance on foreign oil, support rural economies, and cut greenhouse gas emissions. It's a symbolic gesture, but it also reinforces the policy push behind the renewable fuel standard that has driven industry growth for decades.
That's a good reminder that even resolutions can shape public perception and keep certain policy areas on the national agenda.
To sum up, we've covered a wide array of legislation: appropriations for energy, water, and the legislative branch, procedural reforms in the House, a fast-track DHS funding move, a suite of foster youth reforms, a massive infrastructure package, support for Ukraine, safeguards for cloud storage of sensitive law enforcement data, tighter export controls on AI chips, and a nod to renewable fuels.
Listeners should watch for the next steps on each of these items: committee markups, floor votes, and any amendments that could alter funding levels or policy details. The foster youth bills in particular are likely to see bipartisan interest, while the infrastructure and national security measures will be key points of negotiation in upcoming budget discussions.
Keep an eye on the House's rule changes, especially the Holman Rule, because that could affect how future spending cuts are pursued. And stay tuned for any updates on the Ukraine Support Act as the geopolitical situation evolves.
That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us on Capitol Catch-Up.
We'll be back soon with more analysis of what's happening on Capitol Hill. Until then, stay informed.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.